Today we have another special guest for you, Naseema McElroy. Naseema is the founder of Financially Intentional, a platform about personal finance and living life intentionally. She discusses how taking control of her finances has enabled her to overcome bankruptcy, divorce, and break the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. She shares her lessons along her path to help others benefit from the freedoms of financial independence. Outside of encouraging people to get their financial act together, Naseema is a mother and labor and delivery nurse. Although making six figures for years, she struggled with money, finally realizing she couldn't out-earn her financial ignorance. She knew she had to make some changes. By shifting her mindset around money, being consistent and intentional, she has paid off $1 million in debt and grew a six-figure net worth in 3 years without living in deprivation. You won't want to miss Naseema's story. Welcome to the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast. I'm your host, Deanna Cooper Gillingham. For over 25 years, I've strived to use my nurse credentials to find work that fit my lifestyle. Whether it was raising my 4 children and 3 fur babies, traveling the world, or moving to Mexico and living on the Caribbean Sea. Sometimes I succeeded and sometimes I failed, but I always learned from the experience. Now, I want to help you by sharing what worked and what didn't work. There are so many opportunities out there for nurses today. The Stay at Home Nurse Podcast will inspire and equip you to have a nursing career that is meaningful and supports your lifestyle. Now let's get started. Hello, everyone. Today we have a special guest for you. Her name is Naseema McElroy, and she is with Financially Intentional. Did I get that right?
That is perfect.
Naseema, tell us a little bit about what you do and how you help nurses to become financially independent and financially intentional.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having me on the podcast. I love sharing my story, especially with nurses. So I am a mom of 2 girls, a labor and delivery nurse, and the founder of Financially Intentional. And Financially Intentional sprang out of just me paying down a massive amount of debt and really getting that sense of control over my money that I've never had in my life, and just wanting everybody else to feel the same, because I know how much power it gave me back. And I'm just like, man, if everybody could experience this and we're building wealth at the same time, we can change the world. And so I just dedicated myself to not only sharing my story, but sharing my successes and failures along the way so that other people can learn how to master their money. So through my platform, I coach nurses and other people on money mindset, debt elimination, budgeting, wealth building, and ultimately how to become financially independent. So financial independence is where you get to a point where either your passive income replaces your regular income, or you've saved enough in investment and savings where you no longer have to work. You make work optional. So that's what I do.
That sounds so exciting, like not having to work anymore. So what you said just kind of triggered another topic that I want to get to later. But first, you've actually done this. You're not trying to teach something that you haven't done. So could you please share with our listeners how you paid off, I think it was close to $1 million in debt in about 2.5 years?
Yes. So I did pay off my debt. I'm not 100% financially independent yet. I'm on that path, but I did pay off a massive amount of debt in a short period of time. And the first thing I had to do was just realize, number one, that I made too much money to be broke. And it's not like I was doing anything wrong. It was just, I was doing the things that I was supposed to be doing. You know, I went to nursing school. I went to undergrad, grad, and then I went back to nursing school. So I did have a whole lot of student loan debt, but I was just going through the motions of life, buying the house, buying the cars, nothing super extravagant, but it just added all up. And because I wasn't consciously aware of where my money was going, what was going in and what was coming in and what was going out, I had nothing. And my daughter was turning 1, and I looked up and I was like, if something were to happen to me, she would be in a world of trouble. I was a single mom, and I was like, I have to get it together. And, we'll do things for our kids before we do them for ourselves. And so it really just was having that little baby look up to me like, oh my God, I have to do this. And so it just started on a journey of me like trying to figure out like what I was missing. Like, what did I do wrong? Like, how come I don't know anything about my money? And at first I thought it was because I didn't know how to invest. And I was just like, okay, so let me just research like how to invest. Like, let me research my investment podcast. And so I just Googled like investment podcasts I can listen to during my commute. And Dave Ramsey ironically came up. And I say ironically because Dave Ramsey, if you know anything about Dave Ramsey, does not really talk about, he talks about investing or not any kind of investing that I would want to do. But what it made me realize is that what was holding me back was like this massive debt. And the debt that I had was just my student loan debt, mostly my student loan debt. And, I was kind of taught that was good debt and that, everybody has student loan debt. And then I had like a plan in the background to get it paid off in 10 years. And so I thought, I had it like all squared away, but it was just that I'm just not good with investing. But the problem was that $1,900 a month was going to my student loans. Therefore, like,
wow.
That's a lot of money for just a student loan payment. But not only that, I wasn't conscious. I wasn't intentional about how I was spending money. I wasn't intentional about making sure that every single one of my dollars worked for me. So what I took away from Dave Ramsey was creating a zero-based budget where I planned out every single one of my dollars in advance and gave them an assignment. And when I started zero-based budgeting, like without having to work more, without having to do anything extra, I was able to find. Now, let me tell you, before I say this, I didn't even have $50 in the savings account before I did this, okay? But when I started doing my zero-based budgeting and I got really good at it, I started to find consistently $4,000 to $6,000 a month I was able to throw towards my debt.
Wow.
Right. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. I mean, mind you, I'm a nurse in Northern California. We do make good money. I was working 2 jobs at that time. So my income is relative. So I don't want that to discourage people. So it's all relative. But what I was saying is that imagine all that money was just disappearing every month. Like I had no idea where it was going. I mean, because it was above my regular expenses. So once I found that money.
And you weren't doing bad things with it. You weren't like, no, we would think about you were just being reactive. And
I wasn't
you were being reactive.
Yeah, I wasn't like gambling, buying drugs, or I wasn't doing any of those things, right? It was just gone. And that's what happens with most people. Most people think that they have to have some kind of like windfall in order to really get in control of their finances. They're like, if I make $100,000 or if I win the lottery or if I was going to say Obama, if Trump, if Trump a student loans, then I can. But really like right now, if people just sat down and saw like what was going in, what is coming in, what is going out, and like really start assigning every single one of your dollars an assignment like in advance, you will feel like you got a raise because it's like now your money has a job. Now your money is working for you. And so that's all I did. I created a zero-based budget. I got really good at that. And I just assigned every single one of my dollars an assignment, attack my debt. So in order to attack my debt, I use the debt snowball, which he recommends, and which is like listing your debts from smallest to largest, paying the smallest debt off while paying minimum payments on the rest. So that's the debt snowball. And when I share that, what I want to, I always have to put the caveat out there that when I was paying off on my debt, I didn't have credit cards. And so the debt snowball really worked for me because I didn't have like these huge gaps in like interest rates. My student loans were in the like low 6, 7, 8% versus like, 20, 15 to 20 something percent. And so the debt snowball really, really worked well for me. And then in the end of my journey, I was able to sell my house, which closed out everything. But before I sold my house, I only had about $50,000 in debt left. And that $50,000 mostly came from towards the end of my journey. I had an IRS debt of $30,000, which we could talk about later because it does play into the journey. And then like some debt from my divorce, because like I said, like I wasn't working more during this time. I was actually going through a divorce. It wasn't just like all, rainbows and candy during this time. Like it was real. I went through some real stuff, but I was able to get it done. And so long story, but that's how I did it. Yeah.
Well, I find it really interesting, a lot of things that you said, because I did the same thing as when I became debt free, as Dave Ramsey calls it, into the debt free scream, or financial independent, whatever. I did it through when I was going through my divorce and paying off debt for my divorce too. So I don't know what it is about just like wanting to wipe the slate clean and start over and not have even the money that was associated with that. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's some little subconscious thing that we have going on there. And, something else, when I was talking about like spending money on good things versus bad things, a lot of times we think like, well, I don't take extravagant vacations, or I don't drive a Lamborghini, or I don't do these bad things. I only do like, I'm only, and then they put in like, I'm only, and actually school debt is good debt. If you think about it, it's an investment in your future. A house is an investment, but sometimes because we have, because it's labeled good versus bad, we go a little extra with it. It's like, well, a house is good debt. So instead of getting a house, I'm going to go a little, I'll go $100,000 higher because it's good debt, and I think that's one of the ways that we justify it in our brains.
I mean, it's not only that we justify it, it's that's how it's sold to us, because when you go to qualify for a mortgage, they're going to qualify you on off of your gross income. They're going to say that you qualify for
You're a nurse,
a lot more house than you should.
Yes.
You should always, yes. They always, that is a great income. They don't look at all your expenses associated with. They're like, oh, that's a great income. You can afford $1 million house easy, of course.
Yes. They love seeing a nurse walk in, whether it's to buy a new car or buy a house. They love seeing us walk in because we have great credit, and they will push us beyond our means if we let them. So, okay, I would like to hear your IRS story, because I think that plays a part in this.
It does play a huge part in this. And it's that personal finance is personal. And Dave Ramsey is an extraordinary person, and his advice is stellar. However, it doesn't apply to everyone. But I was like gung-ho, like head down, like I'm going to follow his plan to a T, because it was working. But where it didn't work was when he said that you shouldn't be investing while you're paying off debt. And because I wasn't investing, and I live in California where state and taxes are super high just in general, of course, my taxable income was super duper high. Therefore, it threw me into another tax bracket. Therefore, instead of saving for my retirement, I had to pay the IRS more than what I was able to save. So if I would have invested, and I was in a position where I still could have paid down my debt and max pre-tax contributions, like through my 403B, I had a 403B and a 457 during that time, which could have saved me $30,000.
Oh, wow. That kind of hurts.
Yeah. And so instead of that going into my savings, because I was just gung-ho, Dave Ramsey can invest in the back end. And this also plays into me going through a divorce. It changed the way I had to file taxes that year. It caused me to have a $30,000 IRS debt, which was painful.
Yes, especially when you think that could have went into a savings account or an investment, a retirement investment. And anytime I have to give the government more money, I cringe. But that's another topic for another day. So one more thing I want to kind of bring up before we move on is you talked about building wealth along the way. Mm-hmm. And I really like that, because I think sometimes we as a society look at people who want to build wealth or that do build wealth as a negative thing, like they're the enemy. And they're not, because when you are financially independent, you can give to every single charity, organization, person who you want to, because you're giving from a place of abundance versus a place of scarcity, where if I only have $100 left after all my bills are paid, I can't give you that 100 because I might not have it for what I need. But if I have $1,000 left, I can easily give you 100 and know that I have plenty enough to cover in case my kids fall down and need to go to the ER or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a negative mindset that we just need to break in general. First of all, everybody deserves to be wealthy. I think it's your responsibility to build wealth. I mean, I would go beyond and say that, because if you're wealthy, you can elevate the causes that are important to you. You can help other people, and so you use your wealth to help and inspire others, to serve, to give back. And so it's your responsibility to build wealth, especially women, because when women build wealth, we build communities. So I think that people just need to shift. I don't understand where this, and I had it too. I don't know where it came from, like that wealth were for other people, or that people that gained wealth either did it from luck or from taking advantage of other people. It's not true. And it's something that holds us back. Once we can shift out of that and know that if you can find one example of somebody out there who's wealthy that is doing like amazing things, Oprah, then you should just like get like, oh, maybe that's not true. Maybe it is possible for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that's one of the things that holds a lot of people back, is that they don't want to be labeled as we look at people that have a lot of money and maybe don't do good things, but we don't look at the people that have a lot of money that do a lot of good things, because the people who do good things they're not out there flaunting it, and they're not getting in trouble, so they're not all over the news. They're just kind of quietly sitting back and doing good in the background.
It's those millionaires next door. But best believe,
Yes.
if you are thinking that anybody who's wealthy is a bad person, you're subconsciously sabotaging yourself, because you're telling yourself that I don't want wealth. I don't want wealth. So whatever you do, like if you found that you've had money and then you've lost it, or you've been, really good on this financial plan and then it went awry, it's because of your subconscious. So once you start checking that, then you can really start building wealth.
Yeah. And it's a money mindset, and it is something that can be hard to overcome, because it's something that's just kind of like built into us. It's how we were
Yeah.
raised. It's how, we just kind of always saw, I always say like them people and then us, like we were the poor people and they were the rich people. And there was
Yep.
no going from one to the other, but you can go from one to the other. And I
Yes.
think, is that one of the things you help people with, is their money mindset, and just kind of,
Definitely.
because that's really the first step.
Definitely.
It's real, because it's really, you kind of sabotage everything you do if you don't get the mindset right.
Exactly.
So I want to talk also about, why should nurses get their financial act together? And I think we kind of hit a little bit on that, but let's talk a little bit more about why you think nurses need to get their financial act together.
One of the things, like I said earlier, is that when women build wealth, we build up communities. Nurses is a majority female dominated workforce. And we already know that most nurses are usually the breadwinners of our family. We're usually the rocks of our family. And so if we're able to build wealth, the impact that we can have on our family and society is amazing. Not only that, as nurses, we are the most trusted profession. And sometimes when we have to work, things, we're not able to speak up like we want to, because, we need that check. But when you're in a position that, I don't need this job to feed my family, then you're more empowered to be able to be a strong advocate for your patients. And I've seen it time and time again where people are scared of retaliation, or they see things happening that they know shouldn't be happening, and they don't say anything for fear that they'll lose their job. Even in like making med errors, like I've spoken up when I've had a med error, and I've had people say, "You're so brave. I would be scared I would get fired." Well, I'm more scared that I'm hurting my integrity. You know what I'm saying? And that, if I don't speak up, what other
Right.
patients will be harmed. But a lot of people can't think past that because they're so dependent on the income. I mean, there is a reason why there's higher morbidity and mortality rates, for minority communities in healthcare. That's not a secret. And I feel like we can impact a lot of change if we aren't tied to our incomes as far as our jobs. If we're going to work because we get to work, not because we have to work. I've experienced it personally where I had to leave a toxic work environment because I felt like the way that they were treating predominantly Black patients was wrong. Unnecessary procedures or just not listening and doing all kind of things that I saw that I spoke up about and that they didn't make changes to. And so I had to remove myself from that situation. But if I was financially dependent on that situation, then I would have just been there and I would have been complicit in that. And, so I don't want that to ever be the case for anybody. But I just feel like you show up as a better nurse in general if you don't have to work, but you're truly working because it's a passion. And I'm not saying that making money takes away from your passion. I'm just saying that sometimes because we are dependent on our incomes, that plays a factor in how much we're able to say or do, or what kind of jobs we even take. Because I know a lot of people stay in the hospital and bedside environments that they're not happy with just because they're tied to the income. So it's just if you don't have to work, but you get to work, you come to work and you show up as a different person and you're able to really do what you feel is serving you,
Yes. And I think that you actually can be a better advocate for your patients because,
yes.
and even without saying anything, you have a different attitude. When you come to work because you want to come to work and you have the confidence of knowing that you don't have to be there and somebody does something wrong, it's just the look that you give them. Honestly, you have a different way that you hold yourself and you carry yourself because you're not intimidated by, I'm going to lose my job and I can't feed my family. You're now empowered in that I can speak up because if you're going to fire me because of this, that's okay because I can go get a job somewhere else. But until I do, I'm perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go somewhere that they will appreciate me because even though you might pay me $1 more an hour, I don't need that dollar because I got my own dollars and I got my own ways of making money. And
exactly.
Yes. And there's something to be said also about like artists and people who do something because they love it. They're passionate about their art or their singing. And then when they have to do it and they make a career out of it, all of a sudden they don't love it anymore. And I think the same can be said for not having to go to work, but doing it because it's your passion and you want to go to work.
Yes, yes. I mean, like, a lot of nurses that are there only because they have to be there, or nurses that are working well into when they should be retired because their family depends on their income and they didn't have any plans around it. And the thing is, it's not hard to become financially independent. And so start right now. In 10 years or less, if you get intentional about your finances, you'll be in a position where you can walk away. And usually with nurses, it's less because we've already had like some automatic savings or some things that we already have, in our investment accounts. So it's not like we're starting from zero. But that switch and being intentional, like in 10 years or less, just imagine being able to have enough money in your investment account or have enough money in savings or in properties or residual income from rentals or whatever, so that every single one of your bills is covered and you don't have to think about money. It's not that hard. It's not that far away. It just takes that intentionality.
And I like to think about it as when we have patients who do passive range of motion versus active range of motion. When you're being passive, you're just not losing your range of motion. But when you're being active, you're getting stronger and you're going to have results faster. You're not going to get any results with passive.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not going to lose anything, hopefully, or not lose as much. But when you're active, that's when you see the results. So we need to be active with our finances. We need to be active and we need to tell those dollars where we're sending them instead of letting things come into our life and saying, oh, we're going to take $1 here and we're going to take $1 there. And I think a lot of people think of it as restricting, like, I'm not allowed to do this. You're allowed to do whatever you want. But now you know, if I choose to go and, do something extravagant, go to that steakhouse and buy that $100 steak, that just means that that's going to take me another month to pay off my student loan, or another couple months to pay off my student loan. So it's just a choice. It's not that you can't. It's just now you're making the active choice of which one do I want more.
And I like that you said active choice, because not doing anything is also a choice too. So when you're deciding not to give your money an assignment, when you're deciding not to budget because it looks like deprivation, that's a choice. And that choice is typically going to set you back or not put you where you want to be financially. So I would rather make a choice that's going to help me and my family long term.
Yeah, it's not as restrictive, and actually it's more freeing. It's almost like
Yes.
it's like a calendar. When we put on the calendar the things that are important to us and we get them all done at the end of the week, like, we seem to make it to work every day because we know that we have to be there. We scheduled that in and we work everything else around it. And when you schedule in your investing or you're getting out of debt, and then you work the rest of your money around it, it's amazing how fast you can say, oh, I want to put more money onto this right now. So it's not just about what you can pay off. It's also about what freedom you get when you are financially independent. So I'd like to hear, you have your own podcast. It's called Nurses on Fire. And I've listened to a bunch of episodes, and you have some amazing stories on there about nurses doing amazing things because they're in the process of becoming financially independent, if not already financially independent. So I would like you to kind of entice our listeners by telling them a few stories about some of the amazing nurses that you know and what they can do.
Oh my God. So I love this podcast because some of these nurses were already my friends before, but the worlds of inspiring and just nurses like that are out here really doing big things with money has like opened up to me. Like, I'm just like, wow. And so I get inspired by hearing every one of these stories. But my most popular episode was with Lynn Frere, and she was able to retire at 39, going into 40. And this is after overcoming a brain tumor that wiped out all of her savings. And then in 10 years, she was able to amass her savings back up in order to retire. But it wasn't like she was working like hard or she got some kind of windfall. She just invested regularly, set up a plan, stuck to it, believed in the market returns, and just left it like that. It was just that simple. But she was intentional about where her money was spent. She was a very smart person. Like, she started investing when she was 12, but like I said, all of her investments got wiped out when she had a brain tumor in her late 20s. But she was able to piece it together with her and her husband stays home mostly with the kids, and retired in 10 years. So
Wow.
that's the most popular episode. I have stories of people who are able to travel the world and use the world as their kids' classroom and be able to work 6 days a month and be basically able to retire, so they don't have to add anything else to their retirement accounts right now. Like, they have enough in their retirement accounts that by the time they retire is there, and then their income that they make right now just covers their living expenses. So that's called Coast-Fi. And I have a couple people on the podcast that do that. I have nurses that have started $1 million businesses. So I have all kind of flavors of nurses. And I also have other experts that aren't nurses on there that teach you things about maximizing your money and how to protect yourself, making sure you have the right insurances and things in place so that you can protect and grow your wealth. So I think that the podcast, even if you're not a nurse, I think the podcast has good information about and inspiring stories that just show you what's possible for you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Even if you're not a nurse, you will definitely love the stories. And it's almost like addictive. Like, you hear the one story, then you're like, oh, I want to hear this next one. And then you hear all these stories about nurses doing amazing things because they don't have to worry about the money. It's not about the money anymore. And when you can take away the money, I have a lot of nurses that reach out to me and they want to know, like, well, how much does case management pay? I have another business where I teach nurses and how to become case managers. And then I help the ones that are case managers to get certified and advance in their career. So they come to me and they ask questions, or they ask, I have the dream job that I want. It's work from home, but it pays, $10,000 a year less than what I'm currently working because I don't get shift differential and I don't get night differential and weekend differential. Should I do it? It's like, you should do what makes you happy. And it makes me sad. And I've never done a financial podcast yet. So when I saw and heard you, I was like, I have got to have her on because this is the key. People, this is the key. If you can become financially independent, you can work from home because you don't have to worry. Now, that being said, don't take a job that they're paying you way under what you deserve to be paid because you are smart and you are intelligent and you are doing a great service. But if you're going to give up the shift differential and you're going to give up the weekend differential because you're not working, that's okay. But you can do what you want to do if you don't have to worry about the money. And that's what Naseema will teach you to do. And there's so much that is involved. And I know she's thrown around some terms here that might be a little unfamiliar, but if you listen to a couple podcast episodes or you touch base with Naseema, she can explain it all to you. One of them is FIRE, which is financial, you say it.
FIRE, financial independence, retire early. And the retire early part is always like the kind of like part, like, I don't want to retire early. Yeah. But it's the option.
Yes, it's the freedom
of having enough, either, like I said, passive. Yep. It's the freedom. It's having enough passive income or enough money in your investments accounts that work. It becomes optional. So work if you want to, just don't work because you have to get a check. And that opens you up to taking positions that may pay less. But you know what I've found though, is that once you really start getting intentional about your money, you take that job, even that pays less, you'll start getting all these other opportunities for all this other money to come in because now you just opened up because like you've opened up just yourself to abundance. Yeah.
Yes. And it's like that reticular activating system that's in your brain that finds things that you're looking for. So when you start looking for ways to make an extra $5 here, or save an extra $100 there, or put an extra $1,000 on your student loan, all of a sudden you see all these opportunities that open up that you can actually do that you never saw before because you weren't looking for them. And it's amazing. It's amazing to me how many people that I talk to, and hearing you say the same thing, like you had a 10-year plan for paying off your student loan. You did it in 2.5 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I never, and you can tell me going through it that's how long it would take. Like,
oh yeah.
But you just do it. Yeah.
I went from putting things back at the grocery store. Like I was at the grocery store actually putting things back, like, well, I can't afford this, like counting my pennies and looking at the money. And I went from there to living on the beach in Mexico because I got very intentional. And when I started planning my money and actually seeing where was my money going, and it didn't always work out. There were times when the car broke down and we got into our, thank God we had a emergency fund, but sometimes that emergency fund went too. But it's amazing how my 5-year plan was within 2 years I got there. And you look at it and you're like, how did that happen? Because I thought I was screeching by to get by in 5 years. And I got there in 2 years. And so it's really, the key is to get started, to actually get started and get intentional. And the rest of it will just be figured out for you. It just kind of happens.
Yep.
Okay. So let people know how they can find your podcast, your website. What do you do and how do you help people?
All right. So the best place to get in contact with me. So the podcast is Nurses on Fire podcast, and that is on all your major podcast players. You can find it on my website on nursesonfirepodcast.com. I mostly hang out on Instagram and in my private Facebook group. So I have a Facebook group for Nurses on Fire. So you just search Facebook groups for Nurses on Fire, and I'm there and I answer questions and I post engaging questions and we have really good discussions. And most of the people who have been on the podcast are in that group, so you get to interact with them. I also have a financial coaching business where I take you on that path to financial independence. So it's the mindset piece, it's the budgeting, the debt elimination, the investing, estate planning, all the things that you need to have in place to become financially independent in 10 years or less.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to have links to all of that in the show notes so that if you need to, you can easily find it. And you just do that if you're on Apple, you just kind of scroll up and you'll see all these links in there so you can find Naseema. And definitely check out her podcast. Very inspiring. Every time I listen, it's like, wow, I just, it keeps you going when you're like, oh, I don't know. Do I really want to, it does. It keeps you going with the whole giving every dollar a name and just keeping on track and knowing you have to keep remembering where you want to get to. And when you do that, you can get there in no time. Okay, well, thank you for listening. Thank you, Naseema, so much for taking time out of your day to be with us and inspire us. I really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. This has been awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow, if that doesn't inspire you to get intentional about your finances, I don't know what will. Make sure you check out Naseema on her podcast, Nurses on Fire, and check her out on her website, nursesonfirepodcast.com and financiallyintentional.com. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I have. I would love it if you would leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, and be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode.